Hello everyone, I am an old storyteller from an old tea house. Here is today's story.
It was hot, the kind that made sweat cling to your skin. I'd spent the whole evening working at my new office job, a cubicle gig I'd taken up after moving to this vast city for a new beginning. Cars sped by, headlights creating halos on the street, horns blared, scooters whizzed by. But I was too tired to care as I trudged towards my apartment. I'd grown numb to the noise, the manner in which this city pulsed relentlessly. That night I stepped into a crosswalk outside my apartment building, the green light blinking overhead. My mind was tangled in a work email I'd left unopened, my eyes on my phone instead of the road. Then the sound of tires, a harsh and too close screech. A car struck me, flinging me to the ground like a rag doll. A torrent of white-hot agony shot through my body. I was unconscious for an instant, and I knew I was done. I came to on the pavement, stretched out with blood pooling beneath my cheek. The car engine rumbled nearby, a deep vibration that traveled through the ground. My legs didn't move. I was a captive weight locked beneath me. Through blurred sight, I saw the car reverse a few meters, its red taillights glinting like animal eyes. I anticipated the driver alighting to shout for help, anything human. Instead, the car reversed in a violent, jerky motion, swinging straight into me. My chest tightened with fear as I gagged and it crawled its way up my throat. A voice emerged from the driver's window, hasty and distraught. I suddenly recalled what I had heard as a child decades ago. If the victim lives, too expensive, but dead, it is cheaper. This cut more profoundly than the automobile had. He wasn't embarrassed or shocked, he was figuring it out. He'd prefer murdering me than pay to save me. I caught his gaze over the windshield for an instant and beheld cold resolve behind the terror. I tried screaming, but it was a strangled hiccup. My hands dragged over the pavement, hauling my broken body an inch at a time. The car swerved ahead again, tires screeching. I braced for the end, my heart thudding against my chest. Next, a scooter skidded into the intersection, its horn a wailing banshee. Its driver swerved, missing me by a gasp. The second impact slapped against my leg, a blast of fire, but I managed to cling to consciousness as he tore off into the darkness. That was when everything went dark again. I regained consciousness in a hospital bed, the acrid scent of disinfectant burning my nostrils. Machines beeped all about me, background rhythm to the storm in my head. My body was smashed, broken ribs, mangled leg, bruised clouds expanding like ink fans. A nurse touched at my IV, face a pity mask.
"You're lucky you're alive."
She said softly but uninflected. My throat was ripped, but I could barely whisper something about the driver. The doctor came later, explaining it was a hit and run. Some unknown individual had called it in. I couldn't shake from my mind his words, "If they live, it's too much." I croaked at the nurse. "He tried to kill me." She nodded, as if she'd heard it before. The police came the next day, notebooks open but faces incredulous. I told them what I'd heard, what I'd seen in his eyes, but they barely flinched.
"No plate, no witnesses."
One snarled, closing his pad. I lay back after they left, trapped in a body that felt like a prison, replaying over and over his reasoning. It was too insane to be true, yet it stuck with me like damp rot. A couple nights afterward, I asked the nurse if this happened often. She hesitated, then growled.
More than you'd think. Some think death's a deal compared to a lifetime of bills.
That stung, a hard truth I couldn't unlearn. I looked it up from my hospital bed, phone trembling in my hands. Tales accumulated on the internet, drivers running victims to prevent making an infinite number of payments, a system that placed less value on a dead body than on a cripple. It was a concept sewn into the cracks of this city, sick and palpable. My stomach tightened with every read, the room spinning. What kind of city had I stumbled into? More, if he were to discover I'd lived, would he hunt me down? The terror gripped, increasing in the quiet hours. They let me out weeks later, crutches embracing my arms and a heavy cast on me. My apartment was odd now, a cube of shadows and echoes. Every engine growl outside frightened me, every silhouette. I kept the curtains drawn, the locks double-checked. Nightmares tore me awake, his voice, the crunch of tires, my own screams. I'd lie there, soaked in sweat, wondering if he was driving around the block. Friends said it was bad luck, that I needed to move on.
He's gone.
They told me, but I knew differently. He'd calculated my life and found it too costly to live. I came across an online forum one evening, survivors speculating about drivers who circled back. Some were certain they'd been followed afterward, loose threads to cut. I couldn't decide if it was paranoia or foresight, but it fed my fear. I started limping along side streets, avoiding thoroughfares even in agony. Sleep was a lost option. I'd have a knife next to my bed, ears straining for the sound of footsteps. The city that had once been so awe-inspiring to me was now an obstacle course of peril, its laws against me. The police eventually dropped the case, no leads, no prospects. I was by myself with my fear, a ghost in my own body, but I could not stay a victim. I started typing it all out on the internet, spilling the story without my name. I wanted people to see this warped belief, how it made men into monsters. It went viral, strangers seethed, others shared their own near misses. Reporters reported it, exposing the decay of law that permitted drivers to kill to save money. They quoted experts, aired survivor testimonies, made it impossible to ignore. No one caught him, but the uproar prompted debate of new laws for a while. It wasn't closure, just a shard of meaning amidst the wreckage. But years passed, no new laws were passed. Not many of these drivers were even charged of murder. I lived to tell this, but safety's a stranger to me, in a world where death was less expensive than pain. I still jump at headlights, still lock my doors 3 times. The scars throb on damp air, a constant reminder to that night.
It was a quiet, cold night, the kind where the world feels hushed and the stars hide behind a veil of clouds. I'd been walking along a desolate road, heading back to my rented shed after a long day sketching at a roadside tea stall. The air was still, save for the faint rustle of bamboo lining the path. My phone was tucked into my pocket, my sketchbook clutched against my ribcage. A car's headlights sliced into the darkness, momentarily blinding me. Before I could flinch, it struck me, the impact throwing me onto the road. The night was still, broken only by the continuous rum of the car's running engine after it struck me. Agony seared through my body, yet my mind reeled, adrenaline heightening my senses. The car stopped, and I was expecting the driver to come and help. But then nothing happened except that I felt excruciating pains in my limbs and back. The humming of the car was the only signal that reminded me the time is passing, and it felt as if it was forever. Then it was an omen, a bad one. Suddenly, the engine started and the car started to reverse, slowly and carefully, directly towards me. The death was approaching me, my heart pounding faster. But why he was moving so slowly? Was he going to torture me to death? No, but he was meticulously aligning with the forward track. I started to realize that he was going to finish me off, disguising it as if he hit me only once. I was so severely hurt that once I move an inch, the agonizing pains immobilized me immediately. I was doomed. Out of the instinct to live, I came to senses. My mind was spinning rapidly. Why should I cooperate with him on my own demise? If I interrupt his plan, he might have to give up. I mustered all the might I had and rolled off the track, just another inch and another, one more. My strategy worked. The car came to a halt. It was another long pause before the driver's door creaked and a figure emerged, boots grinding on gravel. He stood there, a silhouette set against the eye-squinting headlights, fixed in place. That moment of hesitation, it was not a pause, it was a crack in his resolve. The driver didn't move for what felt like forever. I could sense his inner storm, Shock, perhaps, at the reality of what he'd done struck someone, left me lying in a heap on the hard ground. Was he living through the moment of impact, dazed by its shock? Or was he thinking, his mind flipping off the risks? If I survived, I could testify. Police, attorneys, a trial lay ahead for him down the road. But if I perished, he'd have blood on his hands, a heavier load than a hit-and-run charge. That uncertainty kept him stuck, and I made my move. I whispered softly, forcing my voice to shake as though I were evaporating. The driver sprang, half-stepped closer to me, and then dithered. His head tipped to one side, as if he was appraising me, deciding how badly I was hurt. I could almost hear the internal dialogue in his head. Is she going to die? Will she recognize my face? Should I leave? That brief hesitation was my opportunity. His head jerked up, eyes scanning the darkness. There was no car, no sound but the wind, but he didn't know that. He were there, rigid, holding his breath, as if the falsehood could become truth. That moment of inattention gave me a small advantage. I inched my hand closer to my phone, fingers brushing the cracked screen. The driver's gaze jerked back to me, hard and unforgiving.
Don't move.
He growled, his voice thick with fear. I begged him to call someone. My words were a plea, but my mind was a battleground, plotting each move. The driver backed out of the car, growling.
Number 2 dangerous.
His voice trembled, fear, guilt, indecision all entwined. He patted a hand across his face, pacing out a tight circle along the side of the car. Here braking, I considered. He have no idea what to do. I pushed the bluff harder. I growled, holding my phone up slightly. Back off, my phone's recording. It's already on. The driver's eyes widened, a flash of fear crossing his dark face.
You're lying.
He snapped and his voice shook. He stretched out a hand, fingers extended to grab it, then hesitated again, afraid to get too close, afraid of what I could have recorded. But he suspected there was no signal here. However, that did it. The driver's resolve crumbled under the weight of uncertainty. He cursed under his breath, fists clenched, then stormed back to the car. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought he'd turn around, hit the gas, and have done with it. But the engine roared, tires spewing gravel. There's another pause. My heart's beating even faster and louder. Eventually, he sped off into the night, leaving me alone, alive, and clutching my phone like a lifeline. Relief poured over me as the car's taillights vanished from sight, but only for an instant. I fumbled with my phone, sweat and blood making my palms slippery, and flung open the recording. My heart dropped. The screen was empty, nothing but a smear of dirt and black, the camera directed blankly at the ground during our fight. No face, no license plate, no proof. The lens would have cracked on impact, or I'd have been holding it incorrectly in my hysteria. Either way, I had nothing to present to the world as evidence of what had occurred. Pain pulsed through me, but despair struck harder. I couldn't let this slip into silence, couldn't let him escape. Another driver found me fortunately and took me to the hospital. The second day, I reported to the police, but since I had no evidence or even a clue, the case went cold. 2 days later, I struggled back to my shed. I fell at my desk and seized my sketchbook. My fingers shook as I clutched a charcoal stick, but I steeled it hard. I sketched the car, the dented fender, the indistinct shine of headlights. I roughed out the driver's shape, broad shoulders crouched in uncertainty, faceless but recognizable. The road curved outward in fragmented lines, the gravel laid out like a map to my staying alive. It wasn't a photograph, but it was mine, a memory etching sliced from remembrance. I snapped the picture with my phone, the last bar of life from the battery flashing, and put it up on every outlet I could reach. My message was raw, immediate, hit and run. This car, this driver, last night on Route 17. Please, if you know anything, help me. I hit post and held my breath, shallow gasps in hopes the internet might amplify my voice where my camera had not. The reply was a dribble, not a flood. A few likes, some shares, a universal hope you're okay from a person I did not know. Days passed, and the silence on the internet matched the desolation of that rock road. He scrolled past the majority, disinterested or doubtful. My work was not enough to penetrate the noise. I did not stop. I kept drawing, each picture more detailed, more urgent. The car in another direction, the boots on the driver, the way the headlights cut through night. I posted him all, a series of my fight, a scream that no one ever listened. And then, one night, a note flashed on my screen.
That car, I've seen it parked near the old mill. Not sure, but it looks near.
It was a thread of hope, thin as it was and fragile, but it was something. I held my charcoal tight, steeling myself with determination. Even if the world barely heard, I'd keep painting, keep screaming into the emptiness until someone, helped me drag the truth out of the shadows.
Spring used to mean rebirth when the city air whiffed with the faint smell of flowers through windows in the cracks of our tower block. But it was before 2023, when my world turned into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I'm a father, at least I was, a hollow man relating these events because I lived when they died. My boy was 7 years old with bright eyes whose laugh resonated from the peeling walls surrounding our living room. His hair felt like silk and smelled slightly dusty from racing circles on our living room floor. His guardian was my wife, fierce and protective with her soft sounds when singing him to sleep. The city surrounded us with crowded streets, and its neon lights strapping above like an agitated beast with no awareness that terror brewed there. I used to take him to school every day, a gray and unfashionable building, the quiet part of town whose iron gates ensured protection that I had put my faith in too wholly. I gave his warm forehead one more farewell touch and watched him skip through with his little knapsack, and turned away never to know it'd be the last time that I saw him complete. Hours passed when the call tore through my day. Something went wrong and I had to come immediately. I ran through the city streets, wet pavement slapping my shoes, ragged breathing in sweltering air. The schoolyard was pandemonium when I arrived there, parents screaming, teachers frozen, one car idling where it shouldn't idling. My boy lay on the pavement under its tires, his little body contorted on the blacktop, his contorted form raking through my mind. His teacher stood frozen by his side, trembling with his hands, his own face white with death. He hadn't struck just once or twice. He'd gone back and forth too many times to count. The front tires crushed him first and backed away with tires screeching on and into the bloody furrows he planted there with them. Forward he came one more time and back one more and forward one more, each pass cold and deliberate. I could see the blood welling out around my boy's head, dark and viscous, skull splintered open like an eggshell. Part of his brain was gone, smeared into the ground, lost with every revolution of the tires. I dropped to my knees and shrieked my very voice away, and he did not move, not so much as a quiver or the taking in of one deep breath. The instructor stumbled towards me, boots scraped on the floor, gruffly muttering accident into the numb, false tone. His gaze gave him away, hard and unflinching like he'd calculated every move. I hit out with clutching fists. Arms held me back, other parents' fuzzy faces through my blur of shock. Coppers stormed in, screams ringing through the fog, cuffing him as he stared rigidly forward. They yanked him to a van, his form disappearing into the throng, but I couldn't shake his calm. An ambulance screeched up, lights blazing insanely, but it came too late. I lay in it with my boy, clutching his lifeless hand, his skin growing cold. The hospital was a haze of white walls and antiseptic stench. A medic greeted us with creased features, telling me with fingers on my chest like a blow.
He's gone.
My wife collapsed beside me, her screams ringing off the tiles, her fingers clawing through her tresses. I could not tear my gaze away from his shattered skull, the tattered cutout that had been home to his mind's fantasies. His bright eyes stared empty into the ceiling's whiteness, occluded. My wife buried her face against his chest, wetting his shirt with tears and calling out his name like invocation. The machines beeped out their futile beat, an unhappy jest on life. Rumor spread on the net that night. People mourned with us, strangers typing out messages,
We're with you.
accumulating like offerings on an altar. I read them on my cell phone, the glow on the screen jolting in the darkened hospital cubicle. In an instant, it seemed the city loved, that we didn't grieve alone. Netizens uploaded his photograph, his gap-toothed grin, vowing to demand justice. But the current turned quick and cold like one had flipped the switch on it. Unusual reports streamed onto the net, their posts eerily coordinated.
You set this up.
One snarled with venom and malice.
She's weak.
One sneered, and it cut like a knife right into my wife. The harassment wasn't occasional. It was an avalanche, an ocean of hate crashing down on us. Posts copied each other back and forth. Same lies, same venom, published minutes apart on several platforms. My wife regarded her phone, her eyes dropping into well-darkened pools, her voice quivering and barely above a whisper.
They won't stop.
I tried to take it from her to shield the screen, and she clamped down on it tighter. The messages continued to come in, relentlessly, accusing us of faking his death to elicit sympathy. I stood there and watched her wither away, her chest folding forward, reading them one by one. She quit eating, her plate untouched and her stare on the glowing hate. I found her one night typing back to them, fingers wanting to send the message to plead with them too.
Please leave us alone.
The morning sunlight found her gone, her phone lying on the kitchen table still aglow with their ridicule. I heard something hit the ground below with a sound that stopped my heart. I ran to the window and peered out, and there she lay, crumpled on the pavement, her form twisted like his had been. The city noise swallowed my shout, unmoved like all the city noises are. I stumbled outside and fell down beside her, her blood still warm on my palms. The internet crowd cheered at her death, their messages slicing into me.
Good riddance.
One stated, I buried her and our boy together, two graves side by side and cold stones beneath my fingers. The teacher's arrest had been my sole anchor, and months passed instead of years. Two so far, and still there's no trial to speak of. What is taking so long? I croaked to the officers, my throat sore, and they just shrugged and mumbled paperwork and procrastination. I went home and sat down at my desk and delved into the cyberbullying myself. The reports led to nowhere, ghost handles and fake handles, but their coordination gave me the shivers, a song too orchestrated to be random. There were those who had wanted us destroyed, who wished the support obliterated. Initially, there were thousands who had appeared online, parents, strangers, promising justice for my son. Their voices had overwhelmed the forums, their posts a barrier to our grief. But this sinister force kept them at bay, their poison choking out every sympathetic word. I returned to school one evening, the air thick with dusk, the tires worn but seared into my brain. His van had left death in its path, every drive-by a decision instead of an accident. I stood on the place my son had passed away on, the silence stifling in on me, his loss an anchor dragging me under. The justice system moved slowly along, yielding no closure, no punishment, just silence. I laid out my story on the internet, a rough cry on the face of a screen, and the same voices overwhelmed back in on me.
You deserve this.
One typed out, the final turn of the knife that never stops cutting. The walls of my home close in now, the shadows piling up where there once were giggles. I see his contorted form in all corners, the vacant cavity in which there should be brain matter. I hear her screams in the gusts that rattle the windows, her wails ignored. The city roils outside its lights flashing like an indifferent heartbeat. I live to write these words, and life is an affliction, trapped with the memory of his wheels, her fall, and an unseen horde who swallowed them both up.